This is the Private Officer Beat Radio with Rick McCann at the microphone. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to another edition of the Private Officer Beat Radio, a weekly production of Blue Ram Media Group, LLC, and Private Officer International. Happy St. Paddy's Day if you're Irish or you think you're Irish. Well, it's a day late, but I hope that you celebrated it yesterday, Sunday the 17th. I'm a little Irish. I've got Irish in me, but I didn't celebrate it. Did I wear something green? I'll never tell. But I hope that you all enjoyed the weekend. We had a lot of storms throughout the country, and on the side of the world that I live on, we had some severe weather, but that's just all part of spring. Spring has sprung. I have a lot of information, a lot of breaking news to go over with you today. We told you recently how 3 different individuals were found guilty in the homicides of private security. Well, it's happened again. Just this past week, 3 more people have been found guilty in the murder of security officers, all 3 sentenced to life in prison. And I'll have more about that when I come back from my first break. We see every single day, because we have about 3,000 news sources that we're looking at daily here at Private Officer International as part of our news service. We see the assaults, the attacks, the shootings. We see it all. And unfortunately, as we continue to preach worldwide, not just nationwide, but our radio program is listened by folks in other countries, and we have preached this song or this sermon for many years, how those injuries and deaths continue to rise and will continue to rise, as well as the use of force by private security. In fact, today on the program, we're going to tell you the top 12 charges that private security officers face most often. I know, because we spent quite a lot of time going through our own records and crime reports, and this is based on a 10-year study. Went back 10 years looking at arrest of security personnel, and these are all on-duty arrests. And some might say, well, why do you want to bring that out? That's negative. That's negativity. We want to tell folks about the facts, and we want to show folks how we can prevent some of those charges from happening. But I'll have more coming up on this program. It is unfortunate that as popular as the use of private security has become in recent years, that we're still stuck in the mentality of observe and report, put a body there on the post, and let's forget them. Let's forget her. Let's not worry about what's happening there. As long as we've got those billable hours, we're in business. But with the private security type business, there's a lot more to it than that. And unfortunately, many security companies still are not understanding nor changing their ways of doing business. For the last year or so, we've talked about how security services are being enhanced by technology. And while I really expected that some folks, some company owners, would be excited about that and see opportunities to grow their business, to charge more in the billable, many clients are asking for this stuff. They're asking for electronic security. They're asking for technology. Unfortunately, I don't think many receive or are receiving that very well in the security industry. We have a lot of things happening. Law enforcement evolved over 100 years. It's still evolving today. And private security is evolving, but I just feel like many are just pushing back on it for whatever reason. In the breaking news today, we've got a lot of news coming in. In fact, over the last week, it's been a very heavy volume of assaults and attacks and use of force in the security industry, and we'll have that for you before the bottom of the hour. When I come back, I want to talk about a brand new entrepreneur class and different methods that you can make money legally. We'll be right back here on the Private Officer Beat Radio.
There was the explosion, and I remember just opening my eyes, and it got both of my legs. I had surgery after surgery, and what's going to happen next? The Wounded Warrior Project said, look, brother, everything's going to be okay. 3 months from now, 4 months from now, a year from now, you'll be fine. I don't know if I would be as well adjusted as I am now if it wasn't for them.
To learn more, call 1-877-832-6997 or visit woundedwarriorproject.org.
And here's the exit. You know, Johnny, he is 6 beers in already. This is not going to end well.
Football! Steve, he's rumbling, bumbling, stumbling all over the place, and oh, that can't be good.
Look at that sloppy key action. That's going to draw a penalty.
Drinking, driving, possible $1,500 fine, and 1 year in jail.
Yeah, Steve, that was a good call by the ref. One bad decision totally changes the game.
You know, it just goes to show if you drink and you drive, nobody wins.
This weekend, Blue Ram Media Group LLC hit 1,001 radio shows. On several platforms, we have several radio shows, including the Private Officer Beat, the LP Zone on the legal side, and then we have several non-security related shows that we do several times a week as well. And we crossed that threshold over the weekend of 1,000 plus shows, and we're heading on down the road to make it 2,000. Not many people who have a nationally syndicated show or, even those who have podcasts or other formatted type radio shows make it to 1,000 shows. Think about it. Most people who have radio shows do it maybe once a week. There are some talk shows that are on 5 times a week, once a day, and they usually make it to about 200 shows a year. That's 5 years before they hit that 1,000 number, that threshold of 1,000. So it takes them a little bit to get there. And it's taken us quite a long time to get to this number. But we're moving on, and in fact, we have several new shows in production, and so we hope to quickly cross that 2,000 mark. I think that would be, at least in our industry, something to brag about, because most people, and I've mentioned this before on the program, we've had people, including POI members, who have started podcasts and other type of online YouTube shows, and they lasted a few episodes or a few months, but they're not there anymore. So it's hard work. It's not just turning on the microphone and start talking. We do a lot of research here for the topic or the subject. We do a lot of research for the news and information that we're giving. We do a lot of due diligence when we're talking about statistics, and I mention this every week almost. I don't think people realize just what it takes to produce a radio show or what goes into it. This week I was going to talk about ethics. We're probably going to do that on the legal side, because there's been a lot of ethical issues and lawsuits against private security companies and individuals, and it's definitely a subject that we need to talk about. I don't talk about it enough, and unfortunately most employers don't talk about it at all, and we're going to definitely get that to you in the upcoming week or two, because it's a very important topic. And while that was going to be my main focus of the show today, I've changed it to authority, because we're seeing a lot of security officers left out there on their own, wandering around, not knowing exactly what their authority is. Even in states that are regulatory, where security officers must go through a prescribed course, which often talks about authority and law and arrest or detention authority. Unfortunately, even in those states, we're seeing a lot of security officers being arrested for crimes that they should know better, making detentions or using force in making detentions where they don't have the authority. So that will be the topic at the bottom half of this program today, where we'll be talking about authority. What is the authority of private security? I noticed in one of the news letters that we get that a newspaper in South Carolina was talking about that very subject this past week, and then because they broadcast it out on all of their social media as well, it made the rounds through the web. And so I thought, yeah, we need to talk about this topic as well. And a lot of people, they were quite surprised as to the authority of security in South Carolina, and that will be brought up later in the bottom half of the show. Now, one of the other items that grabbed me, really grabbed me, literally, in the news in the last few weeks is this headline: security guards fired after guns found in bathroom. We all got to go, as the commercial says. We've all got to go. But when you're carrying a firearm, well, that's something that you really need to be conscious about. How can you leave your gun in the bathroom? Just in the last 2 weeks, 3 different school security officers in Texas were fired, and 1 in Oklahoma for that very thing, using the restroom and then leaving their gun behind. I know we got to take off our duty gear, and we hang it up the best we can in the stall, right? And then somewhere along the way, we take our firearm out, maybe in some cases, and put it on the floor. I don't. That's nasty to begin with. But when we get ourselves all situated, we do our business, we get ourselves situated, and we get our pants together, put our duty belt back on, isn't it a little bit lighter? Isn't something missing? How in the world do people leave their firearms behind? Police officers have done it. I can understand, women, there's a lot more that they have to do to prepare for using the bathroom and getting dressed again and all of that. But it doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me. Maybe this is another topic that we need to be preaching on: how to gather up your gear once you use the latrine, the bathroom, the men's room, the ladies' room, whatever you want to call it. We're coming right back. You're listening to the Private Officer Beat Radio, a production of Blue Ram Media Group, and the voice of the Frontline Protector.
I don't want to go blind from diabetes.
I don't want to lose a foot or a leg.
I don't want to have kidney failure, so I'm taking control.
I'm controlling my diabetes.
It's making a huge difference.
I'm eating healthy and staying physically active.
I'm taking my medicine.
If I can do it, anyone can.
Control your diabetes for life. Call 1-800-438-5383.
Nurse, I need you to apply pressure to the head wound until I can get to it. I'm concerned she's lost too much blood.
Oh, no.
You in the corner, who are you? You're not supposed to be here.
She's my girlfriend, doctor.
You need to wait out in the waiting room.
Please, doctor, I want to stay with her.
Look, she's been badly injured. So if you want to do what's best for her, you need to let us do our work.
Please, doctor, she has to be okay. I didn't mean to do this. I love her.
Wait a second. You were the driver?
Yes, but I didn't mean to. I swear, we went to dinner. I was just buzzed. I only had a few drinks.
Just buzzed? Why didn't you tell us that? In that case, your girlfriend is fine.
Hey, sweetie, I feel great. You want to get out of here?
I can't believe this. Really, doctor? She's really okay?
What, are you kidding? No, not really. Nurse, get me a suture kit. Stat.
Buzzed driving. Maybe we should stop acting like it's no big deal. Buzzed driving is drunk driving. A public service announcement brought to you by the U.S. Department of Transportation, the Ad Council, and this state.
Welcome back to the Private Officer Beat Radio on this Monday, the 18th of March, 2024. I'm your host, Rick McCann. We're talking about murder. One of the many things that we do at Private Officer International every week is we have a program called Court Watch, and we track the cases going through the court system, cases that we are interested in, such as murder of security or private law enforcement, aggravated assault, things of that nature. And as I was saying earlier in the program, just about 2 weeks ago, 3 different men charged with 3 different murders of security personnel were found guilty and sentenced to prison for the murder of security officers. Now, this past week, it happened again. It just so happened that 3 other murder cases were going through the court system. In Oakland, California, Robert Allen Justice was sentenced to life in prison. He was convicted in the murder of a contract security officer working at a federal building in Oakland during the riots. David Patrick Underwood was gunned down, and his partner was wounded. Prosecutors said both Justice and a second man, Stephen Carrillo, who was a U.S. Air Force sergeant at the time, had ties to a far-right movement and had planned to target the security officers. Justice eventually turned himself in after Carrillo was arrested in the ambush in June 2020. Justice told authorities it was Carrillo who had hatched the plan and coerced him into participating. He apologized in court, but the judge said she did not believe him. He was sentenced to life in prison. In Upper Marlboro, Maryland, a man there, was sentenced for the murder and armed carjacking of a security officer on duty. These are all on-duty murders of security personnel. Desmond Maba, 27, was sentenced this past Friday to life without parole for the murder of the security officer. When handing down this sentence, the judge called this a calculated and deliberate crime and said his sentence, in the opinion of the court, was just and fair. The security officer was on duty at the time when this armed suspect came up to him, put a gun to his head, killed him, carjacked him, and took off. The state's attorney in the court said this was a very disturbing crime. One of the worst that he'd seen. It was callous. It was cold-hearted. It was planned out. The security officer, Mr. Aya Janobi, was expected to return home after work, but instead his wife was to see him next in the morgue to identify him. Across the country, day after day, security officers meet this peril. They are assaulted, they are injured, they are shot, and they are killed. In Raleigh, North Carolina, a man there has been sentenced to 50 years in prison for the murder of a security officer. He fled to Florida, where he was later arrested. Armando Delia Sanchez will not hurt anyone else, the judge says. We take a lot of time in this office to follow these cases, to get this information, to peruse the news channels, the internet, and every possible source to make sure that we can get this information out to you. Another man was also sentenced to prison in the death of a security officer. This happened in Dayton, Ohio, Montgomery County. Antonio Dante Jackson Fountain, 37, was sentenced to 8 to 12 years after he pled guilty to involuntary manslaughter. He was accused of hitting a 60-year-old on-duty security officer, Ronnie Joe Brown, on April 22, 2022. He hit him from behind. He caused the security officer to fall to the ground, hit his head on the pavement, and die of his injuries 2 days later at the Miami Valley Hospital there in Ohio. It all began when there was a disturbance, police say, at a club. The security officer addressed the problem and turned away from the suspect when he sucker punched him several times to the head, causing him to fall. Originally charged with murder, he was able to get a plea deal to involuntary manslaughter. Involuntary means you didn't mean to do it. Some part of your action caused it to happen, but it wasn't your intent to have that situation happen. And in this case, he did intend for the security officer to be injured, although maybe not killed. It was his direct action that caused the death, and thereby that is murder. Unfortunately, the court, for whatever reason, decided to give him that plea deal. Charges of murder and felonious assault was dismissed as part of that plea. He also was ordered by the court to pay restitution for funeral and burial services. Not really much punishment for the loss of a life. You're listening to the voice of the Frontline Protector. Remember, you can read our news every single day at privateofficerbreakingnews.blogspot.com. Sign up for our newsletters, just $29 a year. Become a member of Private Officer at privateofficer.org. You can also follow us on social media, twitter.com/Private Officer and Facebook.com/Private Officer International. We'll be right back in just a moment.
Each day, those that protect and service in law enforcement put their lives on the line. These law enforcement officers often work long and irregular hours in tough and dangerous conditions, run a high risk of being attacked, wounded, or even killed by the very criminals that prey on us. Every year, hundreds of law enforcement officers are killed or seriously injured in the line of duty. Blue Alert is a system that provides the means to speed the apprehension of violent criminals who kill or seriously injure local, state, or federal law enforcement officers. Find out how you can truly help those who help. That's bluealert.us.
Unfortunately, security officers are often arrested every day across the country. These are both contracted and proprietary security personnel. How many times a year are they arrested? More than 1,500 arrests are made every year, and that is a fact. And those are only the ones that we know about that get published in the media. Doing research over a 10-year period of our own files, our own news reports, and crime reports, police reports, nationwide, we find that there are 12 certain criminal charges that security officers are often faced with. And again, I want to reemphasize, this is on duty only. Of the charges, more than 100 are extremely violent crimes, including murder, manslaughter, aggravated assault, and sex crimes. While most arrests have to do with property crimes, including burglary, theft, and embezzlement. Just this past week, there were 14 security officers arrested, including 2 who stole credit cards from patients in the hospital, 1 who was arrested for sexually assaulting a teenager in a school. These are all on our news blogs and our social media. Those arrests are actually increasing substantially. And the equation, in my opinion, is really simple. First, there are more people employed in the security field than ever before. In some areas, minimal background checks, training, and supervision aren't even required. And in other states where they are, well, companies don't police themselves, nor do regulatory agencies. We have the laws in place. We have requirements of these individuals in place, but regulatory agencies are state agencies and often understaffed, and they don't audit, they don't monitor as closely as possible. The ones that I'm affiliated with have been upfront and honest with me and said they usually only respond when a complaint is received. Security firms have all but done away with quality checks, roving supervisors making spot checks of security officers, or even applicant qualifications. Almost all gone. Even the security giants and the small security firms alike battle daily just to get people in the door. And unfortunately, the requirements continue to become lower and lower. And even though wages have been forced up and some companies have been offering sign-on bonuses and benefits, none of that makes for an honest, ethical, or even a better security officer. But what it can do and what it does is it helps to retain those who are honest and ethical. So what are those 12 criminal charges that we're talking about? From the most severe down to the most misdemeanor, I don't want to say minor, because any arrest of a security officer, in my view, is not minor, it's major. But here are the top 12. Number 1, murder. Security officers are arrested at least once a week for murder. We have seen years where the security officer arrest for murder rate has been above 100. Manslaughter. Sometimes charges are reduced, and sometimes they're indicted right off the bat on that charge. Weekly, several times, if not more, security officers are charged with aggravated assault. Excessive use of force with a weapon is usually aggravated assault. In one case this year, the security officer was arrested for hitting the man in the head with his handcuffs. That was considered aggravated assault. We see security officers also arrested for stabbing people. They claim self-defense, and in some cases they are self-defense. Rape, sexual assault. These charges happen more frequently than you think in environments including hospitals, schools, and shopping centers or retail stores. Security officers are frequently charged with these particular crimes across the country. Crimes against children, where security officers groom children at schools and shopping malls. Burglary, embezzlement. Embezzlement happens when they embezzle funds from their employer, frequently in retail spaces where security officers steal, but it also happens in office complexes and other types of businesses. Grand theft, many firearm charges. People that either do not have a armed security license or cannot possess a firearm are charged, whether the arrest is made at the time while they're on duty or warrants are pulled later and the security officer is arrested. Theft and shoplifting happens almost on a daily basis. Security officers stealing from their employer, their client, and even from each other. And assault. Obviously, there are times when this is really justifiable in my view. But victims of the assault can swear out a warrant, and then it has to go to court. Police can charge the security officer with the assault, again, it all has to go to court. But those are the 12 charges that security officers, on-duty security officers, face most often.
Are you looking for the finest private security officer training in the Charlotte metropolitan area? Do you need PPS qualifications in armed or unarmed training? Or maybe you're over there across the line in South Carolina and you need the SLED training. Well, we've got the right training at the right time for you. Premier Training Academy, located at 5624 Executive Center Drive, Suite 142 in metropolitan Charlotte, North Carolina. Give them a call today, 704-806-4933. They also offer firearms training, personal protection, first aid and CPR, and so much more. Call John at 704-806-4933.
For some children, America isn't the land of promise. It's a place where every day is a struggle. Because today in America, 1 in 6 children lives below the poverty line. For these children, living in poverty means going without medicine, going without food, going without a warm home, or even a roof over your head. And that's life for nearly 13 million children of all races, all across America. Where will you draw the line and get involved? You can help these children and their families find a way out of poverty for good. And you can make a difference in more ways than you think. Will you help? Go to povertyusa.org today. Because 1 in 6 children in poverty is one too many. A message from the Catholic Campaign for Human Development.
This week, I certainly do have a lot of breaking news to bring you. So much that I'm not going to be able to bring it all to you. I would be here for an hour or more. But I do want to bring you some of the more serious incidents that's occurred in the last week. In Memphis, Tennessee, shoplifters pointed a gun at a store security officer during a theft. This happened at a store called Super Low. Surveillance video shows 2 men in hoodies speed walking through the self-checkout with bags filled with ribs and other foods. A security officer stopped them, and that's when one man pulled a gun. Police say they both escaped. No one was injured. Also happening in Memphis, Tennessee this past week, a armored truck security officer was shot when 2 suspects attempted to rob him. Authorities say that a fight ensued. One man pulled a gun and shot the security officer, who was not identified. Police are still looking for those 2 men. A Houston armed security officer shot a woman through her car after he says she attempted to run him over. This occurred at the Houston Zoo after a dispute between the female driver of that vehicle and another vehicle got into a confrontation over a parking spot. A security officer approached the lady to talk to her. She became verbally violent and sped off toward another security officer right in his path. He fired upon her. Police later said that there were 4 children in the vehicle at the time. The car hit a tree. The woman is in serious condition. The children are in protective custody while police continue their investigation. At this time, police say the investigation is continuing and will be forwarded to the Harris County District Attorney's Office for any charges. A TSA employee has been charged with trafficking during a child sexting. The security officer from North Carolina went to Florida to meet young children, and that's where he was arrested in the sting. An armed man attacked a San Mateo High School security officer in California. This happened on Wednesday. Police said that the man entered the school, and when he was asked to leave, he pulled a large knife and began attacking the security officer. Police were notified by other employees and got there quickly, began subduing the man. He continued to resist, was very aggressive. The man, not identified in the news media, has been charged with trespassing, possession of a weapon on school grounds, and resisting arrest. It's been a number of months ago I told you about parents in Philadelphia hiring their own contract security to watch over their children because of the increase of violent crime in and around the campus. Well, now it's happened again. Berkeley, California parents have raised more than $40,000 to provide private security for children, for students at the UC Berkeley campus because of the increase of violent crime. This is on top of the already increased enhancement of campus security and law enforcement. They say that this is a pilot program, but if it works, it may be taken to other UC campuses. This is not new. In fact, we were on a radio show not too long ago where the parent in Philadelphia that hired the private security was on with us and explained that although campus police and security are doing the best they can, campuses are sprawling and oftentimes in urban environments, taking up many blocks, many street blocks, and so this was just another way to protect their children. An Emeryville, California school district has been sued by a security officer over a sexual assault. According to authorities, the school is facing the lawsuit in Alameda County Superior Court, but they currently have no comment. A high school student has been arrested for a violent attack on an Orange County, California security officer. The 18-year-old that's been charged in connection with the violent attack has been charged as an adult. Aiden Grogan, 18, was arrested at Yoba Linda High School. Last week, officials said that he attacked the security officer. Cameras caught the attack. The severity of the attack, which included a headlock that rendered the security officer unconscious, indicates that at least one of the boys had some type of training in martial arts or other types of fighting. A man kidnapped a Louisiana deputy sheriff during a traffic stop last week. According to law enforcement, the deputy who was being kidnapped pulled his handgun and shot the driver on Interstate 10 in southwest Louisiana. The deputy and suspect survived the resulting car crash. Both were hospitalized in Kalisha Parish. It happened about 10 o'clock on Thursday during a traffic stop at the 205-mile marker west on I-10, just outside of New Orleans. The driver snatched the deputy and they began driving on down the interstate. A safety monitor, aka security, at Harrisonburg High School in Pennsylvania was caught on video fighting with a school teacher. The two got into a confrontation, first starting out of a verbal disagreement. Eric Turman, the superintendent of the school district, released a statement to parents saying both students are suspended as we continue to investigate. No one was seriously injured. We have talked about Ghostbuster type vehicles, and now Ghostbusters in New York and New Jersey have formed a task force. Ghost cars, often with obscured, altered license plates, prevent toll readers from reading their license plates. They also use them for use during crimes. Police impounded 73 vehicles and made 282 arrests just last week in 8 days, according to the governor of New York and the city of New York City's Mayor Eric Adams. Law enforcement across the two jurisdictions will continue to fight this crime, which has become prevalent not only in the Tri-City areas, but across the country. A former security officer in Oklahoma says he's seeking justice. The security officer said he sustained life-changing injuries back in 2021 after being shot. According to the security officer, the incident happened on the morning of November 7th. Richard Lumen was working security for a bar restaurant called Brick Polis. When the injuries occur, he's now suing, says he has continuing injuries. Another man was sentenced in court for fatally attacking a security officer. This is in Honolulu, Hawaii. The security officer working downtown was assaulted with a metal water bottle, and he died. Rozzy White, originally charged with murder of security officer Michael Stubbs, was also allowed to plead guilty to manslaughter. The 58-year-old father of four fell to the ground after his head was smashed with that metal bottle in May of 2022. There's no word as to why a deal was reached. A heartwarming story coming out of Providence, Rhode Island. Students at the Providence College in Providence, Rhode Island, gathered up and raised on their own accord money to send their favorite security officer to his home country of Nigeria. The man, who had not been for quite some time, did not know that students had decided that it was time to send him home to see family. They all said he was their favorite security officer, and when they presented the more than $3,000 and the airline tickets to him, he cried. And so did the students. It was on TikTok and on other social media. You can find it if you're interested. A Florida security officer detained a murder suspect in Fort Myers, Florida. Two men currently face charges of fatally stabbing a man Sunday at a nightclub in Fort Myers. Authorities said that before they could arrive, one of the security officers was able to subdue and detain the suspect, whose name was not released. Both men, however, have now been captured and are in jail. In our final news story for this week, two are dead following an officer-involved shooting at a Dollar General store. This happened in Perkinson, Mississippi. They were called there for shoplifting. When a deputy arrived to the store, 52-year-old Perry Stevens fired upon the deputy. The deputy fired back. The deputy was injured. He received surgery after being shot in the face. Another person, 44-year-old Kimberly Kennedy, was also found dead at the scene. Her death is believed to be connected to Stevens. The Mississippi Bureau of Investigation, the state law enforcement agency, is investigating. Remember, you can always check out our news in real time every day at privateofficerbreakingnews.blogspot.com. And of course, if you see news happening in your area, send it to helpdesk@privateofficer.com. We're going to take a quick break. I want to tell you about the authority of security officers. I want to explain what is and isn't the law, what you can and cannot do. We'll be right back.
Distracted driving is dangerous, but some people just can't seem to help themselves. There's the steering wheel propper, the sneaker peeker, the fast roller. the nightlighter. And it's not long until they become the fender benderer, the got a ticketer, the veering off the road, the driver who kills someone. Enough with the phones already. Just put them down.
I heard about a shooting involving a 3-year-old girl over the summer. My daughter Riley is that age.
There was a point when I felt that I was going to die.
My parents used to always say a bullet doesn't have a name on it.
Someone put a bullet in the back of my 14-year-old son's head.
The gun should never be an option.
We're Americans. We don't have to live like this.
We can all make a difference.
In the United States, 88 people die of gun violence every day.
We can end gun violence.
This week, for just a few moments, we're talking about a subject that often comes up in the world of private security. Questions are often raised by individuals, by customers and clients, and even from law enforcement. What is the authority of a private security officer? In regulatory states, those states that license and oversee private security, that is plainly written most of the time in the law or within the regulations of that agency. The authority of private security is broad and much more stronger and all-encompassing than what many believe. This week I decided to raise the question and talk about the subject, one that we frequently have talked about in the past, because of several incidents that have happened with private security in the last few weeks, and also because of several questions that was raised through social media and through the media themselves. In fact, in one state, the question was raised, can private security officers arrest you? And that newspaper's answer went around and around and around social media, as well as in multiple media outlets itself. And many were quite surprised, and I'll get to that momentarily. But private security officers, as with all employees of any business, may have some, a lot, or no authority, depending on the employer and the law of that state. In the capacity of a proprietary or a contract security officer, they are agents of the property, recognized under the law as the fill-in for that property owner or management company. In their absence, in the absence of the owner or the management company or the customer, they are the agent. They're taking over for that person, and just like with a realtor, a real estate agent is an agent. They show the properties, they sell the properties, they do all the contracts. They're filling in for the owner of that property. Depending on the type of agent that the person is, they may have fiduciary responsibility, legal authority, and legal responsibilities. In some cases, private security does have that type of authority. But mainly, security officers enforce the rules and regulations of that property. They may enforce the law. They may enforce parking enforcement. They can even make arrest, as this news article clarified quite well. They can detain people. They can enforce all sorts of things on residents, employees, customers of the property, and so forth. Now, a person asked a question in South Carolina. Does South Carolina security officers have arrest authority? Can they arrest you? And the newspaper quickly identified and correctly identified the statute. In South Carolina, under Section 4018.110, the law specifically states that a licensed person who is hired to protect and to provide security on specific property is granted the authority and arrest power given to sheriff deputies, but only on that property where they are licensed to be. Within the law, the security officer may arrest a person violating or charged with violating a criminal statute of the state of South Carolina, but possesses these powers of arrest only on the property in which they are employed. It's a state law. They can also write citations, and they can write traffic tickets, speeding tickets. They can run radar, and with a permit from the state, they can use blue lights. Another question here in South Carolina was, can security officers serve arrest warrants? And yes, they can. They may serve or sign a warrant just like a deputy. But again, the authority is restricted to the property in which they are licensed to be. If XYZ Security Company has 15 different clients, then that security officer in South Carolina has 15 jurisdictions, so to speak, 15 different locations where that authority would apply. It will not apply if he's driving on down the street. He can't pull someone over. It doesn't apply if he's in a shopping center with the wife doing grocery shopping. He cannot make an arrest there unless that's one of those properties that they have under contract. There are a number of hospitals in South Carolina who have their own public safety office, and they frequently use this law to make arrests. There are private and public colleges in South Carolina who also use this law for their officers to make arrests. I know because we do training in South Carolina. SLED, the South Carolina Law Enforcement Division, is the agency, the regulatory agency, but also a law enforcement agency that does license security personnel for the state of South Carolina. In general, security officers nationwide, with the exception of a couple of states, because they no longer have private person arrest laws, may make a citizen's arrest or private person arrest, or they may detain someone until law enforcement can get there. Security officers' authority vary greatly, but as I've often stated in the past, it all boils down to what the employer or the client will allow and what the state law will allow private security officers to do. Another state that this question has been addressed numerous times, and the Attorney General, two different Attorney Generals have written decisions about this. In Virginia, again, licensed, proprietary, or contract security have arrest authority. Not that of a guard, not a private person arrest authority, but an actual officer arrest authority. They don't have to be police. Title 9.1, 146 in Virginia allows a security officer to make an arrest for any offense that occurs in their presence on any premise that they have the legal right to be, that they're under contract or being employed by the company. They may make an arrest. They may issue a citation. There are other states that have similar laws. State statutes vary, of course, from state to state. But let me give you 3 situations that have occurred recently which have brought some concern. One, in a state that does not have specific law or code that says security may make an arrest, but does allow detentions, 3 incidents have occurred recently. One, a security officer saw a disturbance, and we've had this scenario play out many times, scenario in the street from where he was assigned. He went out, inserted himself into that situation. It turned out to be a domestic, and he shot the male. The male survived, but the security officer was arrested. Although he felt like he needed to use lethal force to break up the situation, the police and the DA thought otherwise. We all know the rule about using lethal force to defend yourself or others against imminent threat. It has to be something where it's life-threatening. In this situation, it didn't sound like it was. Scenario number 2. A security officer working at a store detained, handcuffed, and used some level of force a person that was suspected of shoplifting. The problem was he was only there to watch. He was not there to detain. He was not there to arrest. He was not there to apprehend the shoplifter. It wasn't part of the agreement, the contract, and it wasn't part of his responsibility. So, although he didn't get arrested, he did get fired. The authority that security officers is vast. The authority is very much stronger than people realize. But you have to have that authority from either your employer or within the contract. And that's why, as a security company owner myself, I always have everything specifically in the contract. If it's not there, it's open to interpretation, and that's a bad place to be, especially in a court case where you're being sued. Everything has to be detailed. I remember in my earlier years when I had started one of the security companies, they wanted us to tag and tow vehicles that had expired tags or were broken down inoperable. I said, we will be happy to do it. It's not part of the original contract. We need an addendum. And we did. We went back in. We didn't have to rewrite the whole contract. We just one page, a couple of paragraphs, knocked it out. We all signed it, and that was that. It became part of the contract. It is very difficult to defend yourself if it's not in black and white. Another situation occurred. This didn't happen recently. It was a few years ago. A security officer in Virginia shot and killed a person who pulled a gun on him. That sounds like it was legit. It sounds like, yeah, reasonable. He defended himself. But the problem was he was assigned at XYZ property. He saw a disturbance in the parking lot of that property. He intervened. He told the people to leave. They went a couple of businesses over and continued to fight or argue or whatever the case was. The security officer crossed over several boundary lines to that property, intervened, inserted himself, and wound up using deadly force. He was convicted and sent to prison. He had no authority to be there. I understand that we're trying to, be a good Samaritan. I understand that we're trying to help someone. But he had already, or someone had already called the police. He had no authority there, and thus he became not the victim, but the suspect. These things play out quite often. Nationwide, security officers' authority has actually increased substantially over the years as more and more security officers are hired to patrol business zones, parks. In fact, I just mentioned maybe 2-3 months ago where one particular city gave the security officers authority to write citations within the park because that's where they were employed by the city. They could write citations for trespassing, having alcohol. That gives them the authority of a police officer without going to the police academy. More and more security personnel are given much more authority with less training. And that's the whole problem. The problem is not the authority. The problem is that the lack of training continues even after that authority is given. There are things that make sense and things that don't make sense. I believe that security will continue being used to fill in many different areas where police were once used. And that's good. That's fine. But you have to have the same specific training as those officers did. You have to have the training, enough training to do the job properly without getting yourself in trouble or getting yourself hurt. We also have over 36 states here in the U.S. that have private police, special police, conservators of the peace, state peace officers. And that position, that title, that role will also continue to grow, and it will grow substantially, is growing substantially, to fill in those areas where police can't provide service. I don't see anything wrong with it as long as the training is there, as long as the quality of that enforcer is there, as long as someone is overseeing it. There has to be overwatch. We can't give people all of these powers and authorities and then not supervise them. That is a complete recipe for disaster. We're going to be talking much more about this in the upcoming months as we talk more about these special police positions, community service officers, technology, and how that's being intertwined with physical security and so much more. If you want to chime in on this, go to our Facebook page at Private Officer International, Twitter/Private Officer. Send us an email, helpdesk@privateofficer.com. Until the next time, you all be safe, be blessed, and we'll be talking to you again here on the radio.